All right, we're going to go ahead and get the work session started. January 22nd, 2019. It's 4:30. We have two items of business: Urban Land Institute, a technical assistance panel report, and then transportation improvement map. So we'll get started with the first item, the Urban Land Institute technical assistance panel report. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll go ahead and get started then. I would like to first, on behalf of our group, just say thank you very much for the opportunity to come to the town of Waxhaw. It has been an absolute joy of ours on this side of the table to come and have this experience and represent the Urban Land Institute, be a part of your panel, and just thrilled about the experience and then ultimately the product. I'm very proud of what we've been able to produce and give back. So before we jump in, I want to click through some upfront slides, tell you a little bit about ULI. We'll do an official introduction of our panel. And then also, we want to just keep this dialogue very open, okay? So as we're talking, feel free to ask questions and interject. We would welcome that so we can have a little dialogue and discussion as we go, okay? We know that you've all been briefed on this book right here, and this has just been sent to you. So what we're about to present is basically a summary of what this document has in it. So we'll try to be brief and leave plenty of time to have some dialogue. So why don't we just go ahead and jump in. I have to say a little bit about ULI, of course.
So you want to introduce each member?
I will do that. There's
okay.
a slide. It's actually the very next slide, but I sort of have to clean. I sort of have to start with this.
All right.
Teresa promised us to do it. We made sure we will say this. So the Urban Land Institute, it's a very old organization. It's national, and it's been established back in 1936 as an independent, nonprofit education and research group. And the whole purpose of ULI is to really provide leadership in the responsible use of land and creating sustaining, thriving communities worldwide. Lots of members, and it represents the entire spectrum of land use, planning, design, development. And it's not just public or private. It doesn't serve any particular special interest. It's nonpartisan, and it truly focuses on the highest and best use of land and making our communities better. That's really the purpose, and that's why we've all joined other colleagues in this mission. Okay, so here's the panel, and we had a very good group for this particular report. We have most of the members back again before you today. Again, my name is David Malcolm. I work for McAdams. We're a multidisciplinary firm. I'm the Director of Design and Planning for the Charlotte region. I'll start here with Ashley Bonowitz is with Stantec. She's an urban designer, and in her practice focuses a lot on downtown revitalization. We have Jessica Rossi here, who is with Kimley Horn, and is a planner and an analyst, and works all over the country on all kinds of interesting projects and does a lot of redevelopment work. And then finally, Dennis Richter is the president of Richter Development. He has a very excellent resume in private development projects and has specialized in mixed-use development, urban infill, and projects very similar to a lot of the scenarios that we're talking about today. So has an intimate experience with performing on those kinds of projects. The other members, let me just mention, the original panel had Nicole Frombach, who was early in her career was a retail specialist and now also works for National Home Builder. Zach Gordon is the Director of Planning for Kannapolis. So he was with us, excellent resource, and so glad to have him on board. And then of course, Teresa Salmon, who is the Executive Director with ULI, is with us as well. So this is the process. We've got information from Kurt via a briefing book. We got briefed the day before we came down to do our study, and we walked around, did a tour of the corridor. It was fantastic. Walking day, I just remember how nice the weather was that day, and met with, and then the very next day we came back and met with a series of key stakeholders, some of which I saw in the room. We came back, yeah.
Since you said you're going to interject questions.
Please do, yeah.
Can I ask who chose the stakeholders and how?
So I don't know all the nuance to that, but I think that the stakeholder group was assembled mostly from the town side. We didn't assemble that panel.
Okay.
So you all provided to us the group, and it was a mixture. It was landowners in the corridor. It was interested parties, folks from the original downtown committee, and other key stakeholders in the corridor, both business owners and landowners. So I don't know if there was any special process on how it was picked, but we had two really good groups. And then we also had some public officials that met with us as well. So I think it was very well rounded in the voices that we heard from. Okay, and so we heard a variety of perspectives, and we'll touch on those in a second. And then ultimately our group debated those issues, and then we framed up some recommendations, and then we came back later that night. And it is a blitz, I'm telling you. It's one day action-packed, and we put together quite a bit of material to talk about that evening. So this was the actual assignment, okay, just summed up for you, where we were invited, our panel, to come and look at the highest and best use for the core parcels, and we'll talk about those. We'll highlight again in a slide in a moment, but with specific interest to 216 Northwest Main Street parcel, and we'll point that out in a moment. And then there were a handful of what we're calling peripheral parcels, sort of other chess pieces that came into play. We took a look at some of that as well. And then ultimately the town's hope was to come away with a roadmap and some good recommendations to help essentially create, some appropriate development in your downtown that's going to be standing the test of time and best moves for you. And then this was the specific questions that we were asked, those 3 bullets. So how should the town leverage the Nevin Price building for downtown economic development? And sub-questions within that were, should the town keep the building and continue renting it out? Should the town divest itself of the building? And if so, does the town renovate it first or require historically appropriate renovation as part of a developer agreement? And then the third subset is, how does parking come into play? So that was a big question. The next one was, how do we provide adequate civic space downtown? Specifically, we need to continue to put on town events, and we will also need a new town hall facility in the next few years. Yes?
Who gave you that statement? We will need a town hall in the next few years.
Well, these
I would
were-
disagree with that statement.
Okay. Well, I'm not exactly sure, again, how that was summed up. These are the questions we were given in our summary packet.
Okay, so that was provided.
So maybe.
These are staff-provided questions, and so the basis of that question is that the existing facility is rented, and so it doesn't presuppose that it's a new town-owned facility, but it could be a town lease facility. But just a simple statement of, we've got a lease that expires in November, so.
And that was the exact context that it was framed up later for us, because we went back and said, can you restate all these in different words? And that's exactly how it was framed up. So these may be summarized. Continue to ask as we go here. So the last one was, what opportunities for public-private partnership might we consider, and specifically as it relates to parking, building, redevelopment, or development of civic spaces? So this is essentially the study area. The green in this map represent the parcels. The main ones were right here in the core, and then we looked at this one here that was a little bit out. These here along Main Street, some of the park spaces, and then this larger parcel, and then this was way out here. I think this is the library. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on this. This felt a little removed. But the Main Street boundary happens to encompass pretty much all of these, except for this one. But we just thought that was interesting, that all of these did fit within your Main Street. So it's consistent in our core study.
And so as we conducted the site analysis, we also did a previous plan review, which included your visioning plan from 2012, and included a lot of opportunities and concerns within downtown. And from that, we gleaned these 6 main goals and strategies. And really our main focus was more on the marketing and redevelopment opportunities, which could possibly include a civic use and or enhanced parking strategy. And then as we did the plan review, we also listened to those key stakeholders, and from them we heard a wide variety of concerns as well. And they were either high-level ideas like improving the quality of offering in downtown while maintaining the small-town feel, and addressing the parking issue, especially around events. And then we also heard sort of smaller-scale, site-specific ideas about needing more retail or restaurants or other revenue-producing products, all with the overlay of historic preservation being kept in mind. And so from all of that being considered, our site analysis, our previous plan review, and the key stakeholders, we agreed upon these 7 guiding principles. And we had sort of the overall downtown main principles of enhancing it as a destination, promoting daytime activity, and expanding open space. And then we also had the more study area specific principles of preserving historic character, returning town-owned property to private use, and prioritizing parking. And these all had the overlay of prioritizing implementation first to make these a reality.
So in addition to the plan review, we also did a fairly quick and high-level market analysis so we could kind of understand what we were working for from real estate market perspective. And so when we looked at the retail market, there's kind of this yin and yang in Waxhaw. First of this, the market snapshot, which is showing some national concepts like the Lowe's and the Walmarts and the Harris Teeters. And what we see with those is that those concepts tend to kind of follow the like. So they like to be by each other. So you have that side of the retail equation, but in addition you have this really unique attribute of your downtown, which is attracting a completely different type of tenant. They are local restaurants or regional operators, breweries. It's just this really unique and attractive mix that you have to work with, which already kind of kickstarts the market here as some place that you want to be. And so, we know that there's a great impact of downtown and there's a lot of vesting here. So we wanted to be, clear of that, and we took that into consideration. We looked at demographics. We did kind of a quick shot of this and how your demographics here and the people that would come into your downtown and influence the retail potential down there, how they compare to other areas, and it's very attractive.
Radius on that? 5 miles? Okay, thanks, Kurt.
Oh, thank you. I was like, wow, I answered that really well. Yeah, 5 miles.
He's sitting there like this.
It must be he was trying to get it to my back of my head. And so we looked at future growth. We liked some of the concepts that were down there. There's some interesting incubator space that's been there that has some potential in the coffee roaster and how that's transitioning into actual tenants and businesses that are thriving. What is keeping people and bringing them into downtown to spend their money and to kind of help build and grow your spending power. And one thing we looked at quite a bit, and this will come back in our recommendations, is how you increase your daytime and foot traffic. I don't think there's anybody that would argue you guys have a great weekend and evening business with some of the restaurants that are there, but how do you increase that daytime foot traffic, which is a lot of times driven by employment. So I guess jumping in, and you guys panelists jump in and kind of support me on this, is the first thing we did, we spent quite a bit of time. In fact, all of our stakeholder interviews were in the 216 West North Main building. So we spent a lot of time in this building, and I think we all agreed it was pretty cool, at least definitely on the inside. And so a few things that we came out of as we thinking through some of the low-hanging recommendations is. We were in favor of a facade improvement to the entire frontage of the building. We think that adds value. We think that it adds attractiveness to the building and potentially increases the marketability. By having the facade improvements complete, the town of Waxhaw should be able to demand a market price for the building. We believe that the town would achieve the highest and best value by offering a public RFP process to attract private developer. It also allows the town to have some control over how that process moves forward and what the terms of the process would be. And we think it is in the best long-term interest of the town to maintain ownership of the rear lot, so the parking area, to allow for public parking facilities both now and in the future. So that's kind of, I guess, just a quick jump into some of the recommendations.
Yes, yeah, we like to jump in there as fast as possible to not sort of unveil this too much, but we're going to talk more about this in plan view and some of the more finer points about how to organize other properties around it as we unveil more. But let's talk about this in plan view for a moment and look at sort of the bigger picture. This is, of course, just an aerial shot of downtown Waxhaw. This is Main Street, and this is Broome and Church, I believe. And so that's the basic orientation for the map that I'm now going to click to and show you. This is the first thing we sort of sketched when we came back, and when we heard all the stakeholder input and we wanted to begin to organize our thoughts on plan. We first noticed that, boy, you've really got it right. As far as small walkable downtowns go, when this town first was built, it was organized on the rail. No secret there. You're across, sort of a bifurcated Main Street with the rail running through it. And your Main Street was set up with all of the stores facing onto the road. Okay, so many towns would just absolutely love to have what you have because it's authentic. You've kept it, you've maintained it, you've been stewards of the historic nature of your town. And so in doing that, you've sort of paid attention to the fundamental urban principles of keeping buildings close to the sidewalk and creating an urban edge that pushes the front of the building to the edge of the walk and puts the parking behind the buildings. It seems so simple, but you got it right. So you should keep doing that. And so that was just one of the quick observations. And so in organizing all of our thought around that principle of bringing buildings to the sidewalk, parking in the rear, and trying to activate the civic space, which is your Main Street, and everything you do in here, try to make that as exciting as possible, make the buildings transparent to be able to see into that first story. That's very good stuff, and you should continue that. The next thought we had was, gee, okay, well, we know that one of your questions is civic open space. A lot of people want to come here, and will continue to come to your town as a destination. You're going to have people now walking into town. You've got a tremendous amount of demand from the nearby residential product that's coming online. And so you're going to witness, and very soon, how additionally this activation process is going to happen with everything that's going to be in your core. People are going to walk in and get services that before weren't necessarily needed. And now you're going to find even more demand for shop space and for retail and even commercial spaces in your town core. Okay, that is a fact. So now that they can walk to it, they're going to get right to it. The other thing that's important is civic open space. So not just the sidewalks and the way to get to town, and sort of this promenade, if you will, that you have in Main Street, but how can we identify other key spaces for destinations? And we thought that this was real key chess piece, that this large parcel over time, maybe not right away, but definitely land bank it and do some active planning to bring this on as a real activator of special events. And we thought things like amphitheater or a place to hold small venue, concerts, art in a park kind of thing. And we've got some case study analogies we'll share with you in a second that might be perfect things to study. And then we also thought that this piece of Main Street was really compelling, that of all the pieces of Main Street, this piece in particular seemed to set up well for a piece of Main Street that you could shut down from time to time. We know that that's been done in the past, but we would be a little bit more interested in seeing that happen routinely, and even so much so as to make that piece from time to time just pedestrians only. Not saying take the road away, not saying take the parking away, but from time to time use it in a more civic space-oriented nature. And then we also saw that this parking lot behind this parcel, along with the water tower and the McDonald house, had some real civic open space qualities, and we'll share with you a plan enlargement of that as well. So here's a before and after of how we think that this space can be used. You know, we've taken some liberties to show some enhancement to the street, maybe over time. And we know that there's some projects that are going online right now with some sidewalk enhancement, but if this became more of a plaza feel and you expanded some of the sidewalk uses, again, still keeping it as a roadway, but then from time to time it could feel more like an active. Yes, we do. So one of the things we're curious about is over time, we would be so bold as to say, keep your eye on that parcel. That piece as an extension of your Main Street is pretty key. And as folks that are curators and stewards of the urban space of Waxhaw, you need to be paying attention to what happens to that piece over time. Okay, we know it's not for sale today, but over time it may be. So just keep your eye on it. Okay, so this is what it looks like before. Again, this is after. And again, we're just trying to, just give an impression of what it might look like. This isn't, we'll get hung up in the details here, but we think that this is an exciting opportunity to pursue as a way to activate that street. These are some other case studies that we think, again, that you might know. This is Camp North End. It's come online the last couple of years. It's a reuse project that has warehousing. Again, it has a water tower, and they've made use of this sort of industrial space, and it's very flexible. Okay, it has restaurants that leak out onto it. It's used for special events. It's walking. It's used all kinds of ways, different times. If you've ever been there or seen it, it's pretty cool. And we think there's a lot of similarities to the space that's behind our key parcel that we studied at your water tower. And we think it can be used in a lot of similar ways. And we'll show you the plan in a moment, but just keep that in mind's eye. This is just another way of looking at how you can have, again, flexible space in a quasi, sort of how can you turn a parking lot into civic space? This is very much how it's used on the weekends. Sometimes they just bring trucks down here and unload, but then they block the trucks and then people walk up and down. It's very festival. This is a project which you may be familiar with. I'm jumping again now to the park example. This is in Greenville. Yeah, everybody points to this one. But long ago, Greenville was struggling and trying to figure out how to make its name. Okay, Reedy Creek Park came online, and it is its central park for Greenville. We think your key parcel could be the same way, in the way that it serves Greenville as a broad open space for civic concerts and gatherings. This is the same one. It's very pastoral and very park-like with flowing paths. We think that's a good similar use. But it can have an urban edge, okay? So right when it comes up to the street, Gibbons, I think, you can have some activated spaces there along with parking. We like what they've done in Greenville, too, with this splash zone. And they even have the railroad track. I think that's kind of nice, playing homage to kind of how you're a rail town as well. So. And then finally, we think farmers markets are a good activation as well. We think that we've seen some examples of how this is done. This is in Roanoke, Virginia, where they just took a street with the sidewalk and then built out a canopy, and then all of a sudden it's a covered walk, but the trucks pull up and use it. We think that if you can find a more permanent home long-term for your farmers market, that it could double up and have some uses, maybe at the water tower. Maybe those structures could serve dual use and could be something like this. It's an architecture project. Okay, so we think that that's anyway. Here's another project. I'm not exactly sure where this one came from.
Asheville.
Oh, this was in Asheville, thank you. Cool example of how to put canopy, create shade on the street. It's not too invasive, but yet it's a farmer's market on the weekends. Pretty neat. Okay, let's dial in. This is the core parcels. Again, this is north orientation. You see Broome, Church, Main, Nivens Price there. It's kind of right here. Okay. This is the parking lot behind, water tower obviously. This is one of the subject parcels. This is the before view. This is the after view. Okay, this is what we've sort of colored up on the spot when we came back from our sessions, and what our group deliberated was, how do we maximize and create opportunities along this main street, okay? We know parking's key, so we have to look for parking opportunities here and here, really trying to maximize out this parking as much as possible. And then also create some parking here, so that if you do build out, if you you do convert this open spot to a building, which it once had, you need parking for it. Obviously, you're going to have to park. So where does that happen? What can happen here? It can happen over here. And then we also think that this little slip lane alley opportunity is a real cool thing to kind of link across the block. We think, again, activating this space back here with the McDonald House and then creating some softscape, hardscape around the water tower. It's so neat to have that in your town and just uplighting it, creating some interesting effect at night. People would love to rent that out and the building beside. We think that that's neat. And then you could even close part of the parking lot and sort of host an even larger event. You could tent this parking lot right here, and you could have an even bigger space right in the core of town. We like to have flexible spaces, and this could be another one that could serve that way. And we're going to talk in a minute more about what happens on this corner. We've got a lot more detail we wanted to unveil for you in just a moment, so we'll do that here momentarily.
So when you think about that lot that's at the corner of Broome and Main, we really saw that as a gateway opportunity. That is, when you're coming into downtown, that's your gateway. That's one of the first major parcels you see. So, that's your main and Main. It kind of connects your two sides of your east and west sides of downtown. What we heard from the stakeholders meeting is that there is great retail space downtown, but there could be more. There could be newer, more modern retail space that has the dimensions that a more modern tenant might be looking for. And we saw this as an opportunity to promote that daytime foot traffic. So how can we increase or activate your downtown so that it's more of there's a day and a night component. So one thing that we did, and this was something that I had worked on a few years ago, is we looked around to try to think of some different case studies that had this balance of mixture of uses. They had a residential component, and one thing that we heard was, you have a lot of multifamily that is coming down the pipeline. When you think of upper floors, there's usually two uses that you would think of. One would be residential and one would be office. So if we looked towards that employment use that would activate your daytime foot traffic, what would that look like, and how could you make a case for it in an area that isn't overtly known for major employers? You certainly have employment here and it's a strong market, but there's not a lot of private big-time employers. So I had worked on a few years ago, more than a few, Morganton Trading Company, which is in Morganton, North Carolina. And it's just a kind of an interesting example of an office. They do have a residential component and retail development. This was a renovation of a historic building, but I think you could achieve the same thing in a new construction. But what was interesting is that it was a government-anchored space, so that ended up being their town offices. But that's not to say that it would have to be government-anchored. It could be school-anchored. It could be some sort of a nonprofit, or like the incubator spaces that you have. We're trying to think of uses that would provide less risk. Can come in and help a pro forma work because they would be a long-term, low-risk client. And so when you look at Morganton Trading Company, it was their town hall that anchored the building, and it created that, that first tenant that was a long-time tenant. It also helped to re-energize downtown with both day and nighttime population, and it ended up catalyzing about $25 million in development. I should say that they do have a business improvement district, so they were really able to use that funding source to support this development, but then to also support infrastructure and other beautification projects that helped some of that $25 million. So I do want to throw that out there. So their phase 1 was 35,000 square feet of the government office. Phase 2 was an additional 17,000 of general office, 3,000 square feet of retail, and 42 apartments. market rate apartments that were getting rents that were much higher. Morganton doesn't have a plethora of high-end market rate apartments, so they get very good rents. So the building was purchased by the Redevelopment Commission for $250,000. Like I said, it's part of their municipal service district, so there was a funding stream there. The city of Morganton paid themselves for environmental assessment and historic surveys, and they were able to leverage about $3.2 million in private investment. So it really was, in addition to some tax credits, CBDG money, Powell bill, I think there's some historic money. So there was a plethora of funding sources that went into this, but they were able to make it work because they had a great anchor tenant that kind of kick-started something in an area that was, was slow growing up until that time. Morganton's downtown is beautiful. And so that was kind of one thing that we thought of that helped to frame up that gateway parcel.
I think the other interesting thing about Morganton is they have a phenomenal Main Street and government and economic development structure that works
Yes.
very, very well together.
Yes, I agree.
Very well together.
So I'm going to focus on what we've called the gateway parcel, which is your Main and Main, which is Broome and Main Street. And, just kind of to start out, we did get, with stakeholders that we talked to, those that gave us their feedback, there was definitely pushback on doing anything with that parcel. Evidently, it's where you have your festivals. It's kind of a town gathering place right now. So right off the bat, we knew that was, doing anything with that piece of property was going to, elicit a lot of feelings and some pushback from the people. But, our role really is to make sure that we're giving you kind of some feedback on what we think, from our experience, is the highest and best use of the parcel. So, you've all been to many downtown main streets. Corners are the most important thing down there. It's very hard to have a downtown fabric where you have a blank, where you're walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a blank, especially a parking lot. And that's kind of what's occurred on that corner is it's very visible. So we really felt that the highest and best use was going to be to ultimately have a building there. How that happens, there can be a number of ways that happens. Jessica gave us some examples of what other towns have done, but it's a certain size. So we came up with a concept. Basically, we didn't want to take the whole parcel and make it a building. We knew there needed to be some parking associated with any type of use. So we basically came up with a floor plate of about 6,500 square feet. First floor, that would be all retail. The building could be 2 stories, it could be 3 stories, it would bring it to about 14,000 square feet of office. So it addresses a number of things, and this was already brought up in the presentation. The retail demand, it provides new, modern retail space. It adds to your retail opportunities in downtown. Provides for office space downtown, which will bring daytime traffic to the downtown businesses. Right now, there's really nothing happening, no office downtown of any significance that's bringing people to do shop or dine during the day. We talked about earlier about municipal anchors. That's definitely something we could talk some more about. And then, of course, the increased tax base that would come with any new building that is built there, because it would be a fairly good-sized building. So we've talked about the parking, the location of the site. So I'll go ahead and go over to the next slide. So we did a couple of concepts of what might that look like. With computer rendering these days, you can do just about anything. So here's the corner as it exists today. It's a few trees around it. It's a gravel lot. So we kind of thought, well, if we had a 1-story building with a 2nd-story office, what might that look like? So you can see the first floor with awnings. You've got the 2nd floor office space. And if you had enough demand or you had an anchor, and one of the anchors that was brought up was a municipal anchor that could sign a lease for all or a good majority of the office space, because that's quite honestly what would be needed to be able to build a building like this. You wouldn't be able to build it on spec. From a developer's perspective, we couldn't come out here and build a building and put a sign on it. It would have to be pre-leased. So here's the 3-story building. That would make it the tallest building in your downtown. That may or may not be desirable. That's something for a later debate, but this would give you an idea of what a 3-story building would look like. Here's some more examples of how that might happen here. I don't remember what this is. Is this Baxter? Yeah. So this is in downtown Baxter. 3-story building, kind of looks like it. ironically. And here's a building in downtown Davidson, first floor retail, second and third floor. I think these are actually office condos. And so we talked about the phasing implementation of the overall.
Just a quick question. Implied in what you said was sell the property and get commercial tax base, town lease back.
Correct.
Did I get that right?
That's correct, yes. Sure. Thanks for clarifying that. Yes, we would see this as a private development, not a county-sponsored development. One suggestion is that if there's a need for office space, town hall, whatever it might be, that would be the anchor. It would take an anchor to build a building like this. It would be very hard to lease the retail up front, especially in a smaller town. It would have to happen once the building's underway. So you really have to have a tenant that leases that second floor and or third floor to be able to finance the project. But it would add to the tax base. Exactly. So phasing. We've talked about the options for the Niven Price building. That's kind of in play now, I think. There's been an appraisal done. We kind of mentioned kind of what our thoughts were as far as, I think in the report, it says that we would recommend that facade go ahead and be enhanced by the city and that the building be sold with the facade improvement in place as one option. The reason for that is that way you control the improvement and you don't have to worry about that the next owner actually goes through with it and improves it the way you want to see it. Improving the parking lot behind that, holding that in the city's parking spaces for that area of town, because you're a little lighter parked on that side of downtown versus the other side of downtown. Talk about the additional parking overflow on the south side of town. We had a couple spots we had shown for that, along with the event space in the park. And then the corner parcel is kind of would take the longest, probably, would be the piece that you would probably be last in the line of things to do. Yes?
Curiosity question. Do you have any experiences with Niven's Price building? To maintain its historic charm, character, one option would be to put some restrictions, whatever that means. What does that do to the value of the property when you're trying to sell it or send it out for RFP? Do you have any experiences with that?
You're talking about restrictions on the use?
Restrictions on the building from a historical perspective. You can't tear it down and that kind of stuff.
I don't.
Yeah, you got to keep the structure, the structure looking consistent with.
I think that is the value here.
It is, but also you have people that
would want to. Yeah, you would definitely not want to take it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that restriction I don't think would hurt the value at all.
Okay.
So you would definitely want to play up that. Sometimes, especially if the town can get grants for facade, they're easier for them to do that. If you do that work yourself, that should be able to be recouped in the sale of the property. So you're really selling it to a private owner that would have a use in mind on the interior. Further restricting what that use would be, you want to be cautious about that because there may be a ton of uses at the initial leasing of the building, so you probably leave it open. So it's going to be a retail use, an office use anyway. So. Okay, so let me just go ahead and move along here. So, okay, but that was it. Okay, so you've already run the question.
Thing you said it'd probably be office use, but Morganton also is very strong with residential on the second floor. Do you see that in this, or corner lot, or Niven's Price?
Yeah, Niven's probably not so much. It could be a cool apartment or two up there, but it's probably, it could be that, but it probably is not going to be the best use for it. On the corner of the new building, you've got some apartments under construction a couple blocks away, with amenities. I think that a new construction, taking one or two floors and make them apartments just isn't desirable, and you'd have a hard time competing with the market. So it kind of limits you really to office use, municipal use on those top one or two floors.
We felt real strongly, I think, when we were originally debating the uses, and when we drew it, I think we were very intentional about drawing and showing and illustrating what it might look like layered as retail, office, and office. I think one of the most compelling reasons to do that is just sort of studying the tax base, sort of understanding how your desire to want to diversify and grow some of that commercial opportunity in your town. This could help fill some of those goals. That's not the end all be all. I think the other real reason is, as Dennis mentioned, is you got so much residential coming online. Yeah. Boy, it's coming fast too, and so we just think there's going to be a tremendous demand for services additional retail space. We know that the occupancy rate is quite full in downtown. It's only going to get more demand. So I think those are some of those drivers.
We're seeing, I mean, when you look nationally on a much broader scale, the opportunity to have office space in an authentic downtown setting has been really attractive to a variety of employers who are no longer making decisions based on where the CEO wants to live and their big giant house, which you have that here too, which is really great, but based on where their employees might want to walk to lunch or walk to a shop, and there's only so many places like that out there, and so I think that's something you should leverage here.
Well, as a couple of other independent business owners shared last week, be great to have a location in Western Union County, but it'd be great to be downtown Waxhaw because you can bring your client downtown and take advantage of downtown. So take advantage of the full selling.
Sure. Well, one thing I meant to point out, we were talking about the corner. I think you all, I'm sure, got this, but we're obviously taking away your civic space. But that was the idea for the other part of closing down a part of Main Street. We really felt that it was a comparable location. You know, we're talking about the section on the drawing where we closed down part of Main Street, showed a stage at the other end. So we really were moving that event space from the corner to, it's kind of a busy corner as it is, to a more safe space that's got some green, got some shade, it's got some trees, and just much more flexible. So I think one of the things you may find as you pursue maybe some of these options is the town saying, oh no, that's where we have all of our gatherings, how can you put something there? And I think it only takes a little bit of selling to prove to them that the other location, and maybe a trial where you move a few things over there and try it out so they get accustomed to going over there. Access is better all the way around, so I had to point that out.
Well, along with that, you said amphitheater and gathering at the park too.
Sure. Yeah, that's an addition. That was probably a whole other event space.
So I think just the size of that. I know it's been land banked, and I think it's been earmarked for a park or some kind of civic space for a while. At least that's what was revealed to us in our sessions. And so when we began to think about it, should that continue to be that? By all means. I mean, we think that there's already a lot of reason to come to town. This is just one more destination you can add to the mix. Like a lot of towns have figured out through economic development. Their mission was economic development, and they slowly came to and arrived at, really awesome civic space that's programmed the right way, that we can host unique events and set you apart. Because not only do you then have the venue, you've already got the authentic setting that people want to go before and after. The idea is, how do you keep people longer in your downtown? They're already here. So how do you keep them the ability to stay all day long? And this part, if programmed correctly, and we didn't, other than just saying amphitheater, we have spent no time trying to dream up what it could be, but it could be a variety of offerings.
Can I ask you, in the report you said to keep an eye on and proactively negotiate first right of refusal on lots near our downtown. What is the intention in that proposal?
So,
if we're divesting from one land ownership so that we're not a landlord, what is the intention with trying to acquire other ones?
I think originally we were sort of doing this, and maybe the slide, we can just go back to the map. Sort of point to it. But I think originally we were concerned, yeah, there you go. We were concerned about a dedicated space on the corner and sort of this trading, like, if you will, like how will, just as Dennis described, how will people react to taking away what is now being used as the civic square, moving it or getting rid of it, putting a building on it. So I think originally we said, man,
You're talking about this. You're talking about that's really was the focus of that comment.
That was that we were like, man, if that could be the civic square that's close to town, that would be awesome. That would be just the perfect setup.
So you were really looking at the Rodman House, which is that old white house right there.
That
on
and
Street.
possibly some of the things that are on the other end of down Main Street over here on the
Yeah, I mean,
west side.
we just, it came up.
Small
because-
opportunities to extend your downtown.
Exactly. It came
Because I know we've heard from the owner's brother before, and he has said that if his brother ever relents to sell him that property, he would like to restore that house and turn it into some kind of a museum or event
That
space.
would be the perfect kind of use for
There's
that.
plenty of land around that house. That, that makes it even better. You can do your civic space without that property. It's if you look at it, it's still, even if you cut it off here or here, in the street. Is that all private? The whole street? The street's not private, right? It's public.
It's not private.
So even if you take, you didn't even go into that lot, it's already twice the size of, or not exact twice, but close to, of what you've been using. So try it out. Maybe some of your next future events, move it over there and see how people like it.
I think what I hear you saying is that if you buy it, if you keep an eye open and buy it, go back to what you said before about the Nivens price and the corner lot. If we own it, we can sell it with a development agreement placed on it that gives us control over it. If somebody else comes in and buys it, our control is our development ordinance, and it may not fit exactly what we want to do. But if we have that opportunity to buy it, landmark it, put restrictions on it, sell it covenant.
I'll just give you, for example, a friend of mine that does development who has a house in Waxhaw. I was telling him I was down here doing this. He goes, "Oh yeah, I've gone and sat with this guy in his house. I'm trying to buy it for townhomes." So it won't take long for someone to come in. So that's why you need to try to continue to be in contact with that owner so that you can control what happens there and not let someone else control it. So it's already in process. So
We just advertised it to a lot of people.
I didn't even give him the idea. He'd already been doing it. So.
Comments, questions?
Love it. I really do. And I'm one of those who didn't want the corner lot to be turned into anything else, and I think you've convinced me that the building is a good way to go.
Good.
I agree. I like the corner lot half and half with the retail because I live on Main Street, right down from downtown. And I've seen it grow over the last 28 years, and we need more retail space. So I like the idea of that. I like the idea of selling price dividends, but doing the facade first. We control how we do the facade, but yeah, I like your ideas.
So I got a series of questions for you. Some of the adjoining properties were included in the study, but you didn't mention them, the town properties. Did you look at them? Did you develop an opinion, or decided not to go further than McDonald Street? And
I think we made some comments in the report. I don't think we went to the very north end and took a deep dive there.
okay.
I think we struggled with that, just the amount of time we had as a group, quite frankly.
Well, it's a tough problem too, because you have that plus a laundromat, a gas station, and all that. And how do you look at that and really, in the short period of time?
Logically, it should be try to make it an extension of your downtown. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as your downtown, but it should be urban in nature. It should be denser. It's going to be hard to control all that. You have a piece you control now, and try to encourage the development or encourage landowners to do a certain type of development to match what you want to see extended financially. However you do that, giving them some breaks on certain things so that they actually, if it's not exactly their highest and best use for their property, by giving them some type of tax incentive for a period of time, you might be able to convince them to do something that's more beneficial to the town than to just what they were going to do originally. So there's a number of ways to work that.
And the market will ultimately come into play there because there's how many rooftops that are getting developed right next to it that is a whole host of potential tenants or customers.
Yeah,
or
I think it's all this and most of this in here. I think
Yeah.
is that giving those people, you have a farmer's market, I think, or there's a piece here where that's been, give them a much nicer stroll by helping improve those properties as well.
So my second question was related to farmers market. What experiences have you seen or situations have you seen where it's multi-use? It's farmers market on a Wednesday, Saturday, and then you transfer it over to something else or can be used. Given we have limited space downtown, I think you said you'd like to see multiple uses. So what'd you have in mind?
You can move.
Well, I think the thing you want to avoid is, just this notion that it doesn't have a place, right? So I think it's this temporary thing. You want to avoid that. You want to give it, its place in the downtown fabric. It needs a permanence, and if you keep it where it is, maybe that's fine. It's just that when we had some discussions, it felt like folks were like, well, it's a little bit off the main beaten path. People know where it is now. Once they've come and they visited it and they've experienced it, it's okay. It works, but maybe it's such a cool thing to think about how to tuck it in a little more permanent, closer to town. I think we were driven to maybe make the suggestion, maybe if you took away some of the fabric tents and gave it a permanent structure, maybe it is around the water tower, or maybe it's further down. There's a variety of spaces. We didn't pick just one. You could put it around McDonald House. There's probably some room.
Maybe you could,
We just thought that that giving it a permanent home made a lot of sense, and then trying to get it close to town. I think about other farmers markets that I visited, and are they dual use? No. So I'd like to. You're challenging us to find an example. I can't think of one off the top of my head where they say this weekend it's this and the next weekend it's that, but I bet you that it does exist. I'm going to find it now.
Dave, aren't the ones in Asheville kind of, they're permanent locations, but when they're not farmers markets, they're covered sidewalks, right?
Well,
So
okay.
they're used for two purposes,
I like
but they
that.
don't.
Yeah, that's
I like those
that
pictures.
concept.
Those were
And
very
that could
good.
happen anywhere.
Those
I've been
two,
here.
in fact, I've been in Roanoke, in the city square. It used to be an old-time market, and so it had all along the reason to put it back into the center square. Historically, it was appropriate to do that, and so they built those. And it was just in the width of a sidewalk, 14-foot wide sidewalk, single pier. You saw the image. And when the trucks aren't there, it's covered. It's just a nice stroll.
I thought that was a clever use of
That's
space.
because you pull them right up at the curb, you pull them right into a parking spot, and they
Had a parking
service.
spot,
Yeah.
already
And otherwise,
there.
it's just a lovely
Back
covered
in.
sidewalk
That's it.
stretch. I liked that. I thought that was a clever use of space.
So to do that, where would be the appropriate place?
Well, as Dennis just pointed with his clicker, along McDonald Street,
Here.
along the street there, along there, I mean, you had the whole length of that.
Even into the parking, you could,
Even on any sides or around the parking lot perimeter.
under the tower.
I mean, that's a study, and I think that we would
Back
first
in
look
here?
there to see if there's some feasibility. Part of the other question is it expanding? Or do you have enough room? I mean, I'm thinking about other farmers markets. I get down to Matthews a lot, and they've got that little square. Walk down the stairs, if you've ever been, and it's about the size as of yours. Does it need to grow? Is it the right size? I mean, there's a lot of questions that you want to ask to make sure you're programming correctly before you make that investment. So that'd be part of the study. But we just think it's another way to activate your core. So,
I'd just really like to say thank you. Many of the elements you've discussed have been discussed, been debated, have been loved, have been hated. But what you've given us, and thank you, Greg, for bringing them here, is a coherent and cohesive plan for now, for 5 years from now, for 10 years from now. And that's what's been missing up until now. So thank you.
it's our pleasure.
Yeah.
We're very much glad to be of service. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
you.
This has
Thank
been
you.
fabulous, giving us a lot to think about, and hopefully do.
Well, hopefully.
We'll look forward to visiting it next
Yes.
few years.
You did great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt? How are you doing today?
So just want to take a quick opportunity while we've got a little bit of time to show you what has been a long time in coming. This is the Waxhaw Transportation Improvement Project map, and it was very difficult when we had a part-time GIS personnel to bring this to fruition, but now we've got another Max, and he's fully functional and capable, and we've got something here I think is going to be just a beginning of what I can kind of show where we're going to be able to bring information out to the public in a real-time setting. And we're going to do our best here. The paper is just kind of to give you a quick snapshot of what the data is and how it's, in initial form, it's being presented. When we talk about going onto the website, there'll be a link where you'll click on, and it'll take you to this site specifically. It's a geographic information online system. And basically, I'm going to use, because the clicker is not ideally the best point to be able to use this format, I think I'm just going to talk to Max and he'll work us through it. If you look on the left sidebar, basically that outlines the legend. And the legend here is to outline what the existing, currently planned improvements are throughout the town of Waxhaw, starting with Carrington Square TIAs, Millbridge's, all of their TIAs, our own Kensington project here at Curitin Center, and then on through what DOT's got programmed. If the power goes out, you lose the map. All the way down, everything that even the CRTPO has got programmed for us. Ultimately, you know, we started to focus with just what the existing current projects are, both for our own administration purposes and to explain to the public with just a point and a click. And so that kind of goes through the legend. Some of those are private projects on down through public, and then ultimately I'll be showing more proposed projects kind of.
Take a
Workman's comp.
You all right, Chief?
You want us to call 911?
Need a workman's comp form.
I think he wants
See
me
how
to
quick
stop
his
talking.
officers respond. Anyway,
Right.
continue.
Okay. So then, if you move further, there's another sidebar for base map, and that allows
Just a
you.
quick curiosity question. On the top, when you had TI projects, you had different colors.
Right.
What are the colors?
Basically, it's just to help delineate between where these are coming from.
Okay.
So again, the dots on the map that correspond to the legend names are those specific improvements.
Gotcha.
And so then as we pan in, this will begin to really come to life, and you'll see what the purpose of the using the online format provides.
Okay.
But again, there's a base map sidebar on the upper left, and that helps you to change the background information from the actual aerial imagery. Anything you might want to see that we've already got captured is kind of at your fingertips to help kind of form the message you want to, or make any kind of comparison.
So basically, if somebody says, what's going on in transportation, we can steer them to the link and they can go look
Absolutely.
and see all these projects that you guys are working on.
And these will be, again, they'll be changing over time. Some things will phase out, new things will come in. Even some of this, even though the Ardmore and Prescott improvements are in there, they're undergoing a revision, so they're subject to change. But again, they'll be as live as we can possibly make them at any given point in time. And certainly these will be used throughout just our own planning purposes and for communicating out to the public as well. So then, beyond the base map imagery that you can change, on the right side, at the upper toolbar, there's the ability to share this information, quick email, printing it out, make measurements if you like. You can even specifically put an address and it'll put you right into that spot. And so the real fun from this is you can zoom in and get as much detail as you want. And so if you want to pick any kind of spot, it just starts to come in more and more, and you see all of a sudden where we're just a few spots then automatically break down as you are able to get into the proper scale of detail into the individual improvement themselves, from an additional turn lane, and not just one point that here's a project and go somewhere else and find out what that means. You click on that dot and this information is going to come up specific to whose project it is, what is it detail. We've got project codes that are going to build out a lot of functionality that right now they're just numbers. On the handouts, you can see the code table where we've kind of begun to put in our own unique identifiers, and then ultimately it'll tell you who's supposed to be doing it: developer, town, DOT, what's the status of the project, what's the estimated start date, who funded it. All of those things can then be, once the table is added, boom, the data attributes are applied to the specific locations, and you really have a really useful tool to manage everything that's going on in town. And it's been real quiet as to, hey, what's going on in transportation, and this is a way to say a lot's going on, and this helps break it down to as much detail as we possibly know at any given time for these projects.
It's fantastic.
It's great.
Right.
Thank you, Matt, for doing
Right,
this.
and
This
I'm
is
really
great.
excited. And this is going to play over into sidewalks and anything that we have to maintain and make improvements on. We can add just another layer, and so that legend will continue to get built out and really offer an ability to stay informed.
So, I didn't look at the list, so conceivably, when we go through the budget cycle, Powell bill comes up, you identify roads. Those will go on then?
That will absolutely be a layer.
And then the maintenance ones and all that stuff?
Right, yeah, no, it's only really bound by the resources we have at any given time. Once you do the leg work, it's there, and then you just start maintaining it. The front end problems are going to be getting this information if we don't have it, and then getting it into the stream of workload.
Okay. Just, are you going to have kind of I don't think most citizens would know, or most people would know what a TIA is.
Sure.
Or whatever. Are you going to have a legend that just kind of
Sounds
some
like we
quick
are now.
glossary
Right.
and
Useful words.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be able to build on this. This is the pilot.
Yeah.
I wanted to get the information
Oh, this is great.
correct.
This is
right.
amazing.
But then before we go live, we'll certainly make final tweaks, and any comments you have as we do that are welcome.
Fabulous.
So much
Thank
for
you.
putting
No,
this
no,
together.
it's
This is amazing.
It helps me tremendously.
So now that you got us excited, how quickly do we move from pilot to production?
We can go pretty quick.
Good.
Because again, it's really just putting the link out there at
Yeah.
this point. And I think we have some minor edits to a line or two here, but I think we've got it vetted to the degree that I'm confident. And then it's just getting another engineer in here to start getting that data to Max as well.
It's fabulous. Yes, Fred?
Yeah, this is really a great step forward. Thanks. Can this platform, once you have it up and running and you're in the maintenance mode, be used to show development projects also?
Oh,
The
absolutely.
apartments and office buildings, those kind of things. Okay.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
that
I mean, again,
everybody has.
It's just a different symbol, a different layer, and a different table, and all of those things are. It's really our ability to keep those resources at a level where we can maintain what we've got and add those new layers. And so that's right now. This took longer than really it should have because the TIAs are so complicated. But anything else as a part of the planning methodology could almost be kind of seamless.
But you'll trust planners to use your site?
I have to trust planners. A planner built the site. So right.
Well, the one thing I would note is this one is, as you see, substantially more complicated to create, but then also to maintain than our project list, where we have a project there and then we've got a plan that gets loaded up electronically. That's not necessarily easy, but this is 5 or 6 times more complex, because if you look and drill into the layers, there's a tremendous amount of information attached to every little single point. And then, as Matt showed, when you drill down into the Kensington intersection, there's 8 or 10 dots on that intersection alone, where when you're at this level, it looks like one dot. So it is really a lot of data points. And then underneath that, there's a lot to keep refreshed. So that's dependent on how much time Matt can have staff allocate just to that refreshing. So it's going to be difficult probably to keep it maintained to the same level of adding projects to that project page, but it's something that we can work to do.
Yeah, it gets down to how detailed. I mean, if we keep the data set focused and small, then that's more manageable. If you're trying to show, hey, an overlay of that design building, that's kind of getting out of maybe where we want to get to with it. But certainly, having this information, if we've got it, putting it in a format that it's usable helps everybody.
For every 10 questions I get, 9 of them are transportation or congestion or something. So,
and again, it's funny.
You can start steering people.
This started when we first started. It was 75 points, and I was like, okay, that's a lot. And then we had to get through. There were duplications. There were things that were out of date, and so now we've got it down to right here, maybe 37 discrete, and some of those are kind of shared between what's payment in lieu and but for the tracking purposes, we had to keep them in the system so that we could hold everybody who's properly accountable out there.
Yeah, there's a couple other municipalities that have done some similar things, and what I find interesting, what they put out there is the intro to the link. If you want to know where $450 million worth of transportation projects are going, click on this link, and it immediately gets people's attention and also makes them aware of how much money is being invested in transportation in the area of the region.
Right. And it does show these are things that are day-to-day administrative things. It doesn't look like out there that anything's being done, but these all have to be tracked and one by one in the course of development and grants and all of the processes we have to go through. They are still live and require our resources day-to-day.
A couple other notes I'd like to just make on it is, one thing that'll be the challenge moving forward is to figure out how to take the data that's there and then turn it into some printed maps that are more easily consumed, because this does take drilling down into it and looking at it quite a bit and then trying to understand the difference between a red dot and a blue dot and what that really means. So we have a set of projects that are funded by the town, we have a set of projects that are funded by the state. There's a lot of those dots represent TIAs, and one note of caution about those is that those are solely dependent upon when the private sector decides to advance that project. So in some cases you have the same intersection has been studied 2 or 3 times, and there is a requirement in a TIA attached to a project somewhere in town to make some sort of improvement. In some cases it might even be kind of a duplicate improvement, and so what happens there is the project that goes first is burdened normally with making that improvement if they want to pull a CO and do their project. So what Matt's team does and continues to do is try to coordinate among those parties, particularly on 16, to say, y'all are all being asked to work at this intersection. How can you work together to do that? And then we can't force them to come up with an agreement, but a rational agreement is, if there's 4 of us, let's agree when we can put 25% in and build it. But the timelines and the market forces don't always align, so that's not something the town can drive. We can help facilitate it, and part of facilitating it is just showing it visually that when you're in town and you're considering a new project, there's already some things happening that we all kind of know, but this says to the applicant or the builder, DOT is going to make some investment on that corridor. Other people are being required to make investment at some point in time. One thing that Matt and I have talked about as far as long-term, how can we get to the next level, is a way to give credit where either the public has already decided to make investment in a corridor, the public has planned to make investment and they really haven't funded it yet. How does that work? But in the case of 16 particularly, we have all kind of improvements up and down the corridor down at the parkway, and so at what point in time does the town say, that improvement at Kensington intersection satisfies the requirements of a TIA, or it satisfies the requirements of a conditional approval at some point. Now, that is definitely something that'll come back to the board, because if it's a condition attached to any development, the board would have to have some sort of role in that. But there's a common sense approach to give credit if there's an $80 million road widening project to not ask a developer to go out and put in a turn lane when the DOT is going to come back through and then redo it. So that's the next level of kind of where we're headed, is how to coordinate that. And that gets very tricky because on the development side, they'd love to just say, wash our hands of it and we'll wait for the DOT to fix it. Well, there's somewhere between that and forcing the developer to go ahead and do it that's the middle ground that we'll look to try to find.
Makes sense. Any other questions? Great job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, that's it. We'll go ahead and adjourn the work session, and we'll be back at it in 50 minutes. Matt, this is great. This is really